Welcome to our Horizon League Mental Health Series panel on sports psychology and sport performance. I'm Jessica Kumke. I'm Associate Commissioner at the Horizon League. We have some really great questions today for our panel from our student athletes, but before we jump into that, let's meet our panelists. So first up, Barbara, I'm going to kick it to you.
Thanks, Jessica. And I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this panel. I'm Barbara Meyer. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the area of sport and performance psychology. I advise graduate students and direct a research lab. My PhD is in sport and performance psychology. I also am a certified mental performance consultant and work with our student athletes here at UW-Milwaukee, as well as in the general community.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Kelli, go to you next.
Thank you. As well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of the panel. My name is Kelli Monedero, and I'm a sports social worker. And myself and a sports psychologist do all of the mental health counseling for our student athletes and teams at Indiana University in Bloomington.
Great, thank you. And last but very definitely not least, Betsey.
I also want to say thank you, and I'm super excited to be on the panel. Hi, I'm Betsey Walkowiak. I'm a student athlete at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay on the women's swim and dive team, and I'm currently in the sport, exercise, and performance psychology program at Green Bay.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So I again appreciate all of you being here and participating in this panel. So these are questions that our SAC reps from campus sent to us. So we'll get right into it. So the first kind of question is probably more of a definitions of, so what is sort of sports psychology or sport performance, and how does that differ from what somebody might think of when they just think of psychology in general? So Kelli, do you want to take that one to start us off? Sorry.
Sure. My training is in social work, but I will share what I have known, and I will gladly be corrected by either one of the panelists. So I think, and actually here at Indiana, we sort of think about psychology and anxiety and some of those things as all performance. And so when we think about, the way that we show up in spaces and how we perform in certain spaces, we think a lot about it when we think about examinations or we think about doing a presentation. We think very similarly in performance as we do within athletic performance. And so our, my sort of response to that is psychology and sports psychology, I think, shows up in all areas because we see lots of opportunities as performance. And we frame it that way when we work with our student athletes, the idea that you can use the sports psychology techniques in your regular, mental health care, regular taking good care of yourself, regular everyday performance strategies. So I don't know if that kind of gets the ball rolling with that. I would like some other feedback and input just because my training is more social work, but that's kind of how we see things on a continuum here at IU, is that sports psychology and performance is related to all aspects of our lives. And we want to make those skills transferable in lots of other areas, because as we were just talking about, not all of our student athletes are going to be student athletes forever. And so we want them to have those skills to be able to move on and use those sports psychology skills outside of sport.
I love that, Kelli. And if I can build on that just a bit, if we think about generally psychology as the study of human behavior, and then if we're looking at sport and performance psychology, we're drilling down to the study of human behavior in a sport or a performance context. And as Kelli's alluding to, life is performance. Mm-hmm. Whether you're trying to park the car in front of the bookstore quick, to your left, or parallel park to the right, whether you're trying to get out of the blocks the fastest in a swim meet, or whether you're trying to take the GRE or ace a final exam, right? All of that is performance. And so in sport and performance psychology, we really drill down and look at people's cognitions and their behaviors in that performance context, and how can we maximize that performance in whatever they're doing. If we take that one bit further, and I know from the student athletes here at UWM, we really try to help them understand the difference between, okay, so I know now what sport and performance psychology is. What's the difference between mental health and mental performance? And so mental health is maybe an anxiety or a mood that is pervasive. It affects you no matter what the situation. It's ongoing in your daily life, and it's not just something that you experience in a performance context, but it's something that you experience everywhere at a high level of frequency. Whereas when we're talking about mental performance, it may just be anxiety around the upcoming conference meet, or it may be a change in mood because the coach has made a decision about a lineup. But it's not carrying over or bleeding over into your regular everyday life.
So how can someone tell if what they're dealing with then is more of this performance sort of anxiety, or if it's more of the daily? I think, Barbara, you were starting to talk about that, so I'll kick it back to you, I guess.
Yeah. And I'll probably pull Kelli in here a little bit, because one of the things is really trying to understand, is this something that is related specifically, let's say, to your sport? And it's very isolated, that you're not moody in your general life, but you're just moody because the coach has made a lineup decision that has you not being a starter anymore. But as it relates to your social life or your family, as it relates to your nursing classes, you're fine. In that case, we would say, all right, work with maybe someone who is a specialist in mental performance. Whereas if that mood disturbance is bleeding into or pervasive in the rest of your life and you can't let it go and you're ruminating on it, then I might say, let's look who my referral network is, either here on campus within our athletic department or maybe across campus in the health center. And let's see if we can get you an appointment with that person, because it seems like this goes beyond your sport performance. And so I might refer them to someone like Kelli, who has a background in training in social work or counseling or clinical psych.
Say, Kelli, anything to add there?
I mean, I don't know that I have much to add. Just it's exactly what you're saying is, it's the separation between this impacts. So it's impact of functioning on a regular basis versus impact of performance only in certain situations. So situational versus general impact of functioning would be sort of the other, like the next step of differentiating those two things.
So then next question, Betsey, I'm going to give this one to you. So some ideas for ways student athletes can kind of reduce anxiety, whether that's maybe either the performance or maybe even daily life. I'm guessing there's some crossover between techniques to sort of do that.
Yeah, so there's like a bunch of different methods you could do. So there's positive self-talk, and that's kind of, I use that before I swim, just telling myself that I got it and I'm good enough. And then there's journaling, mindfulness, visualization, and then a bunch of other ones. I think it depends on your like sports context, and because visualization and mindfulness don't work for everybody. Personally, they sometimes work for me, but to visualize, you have to be very relaxed. And if you're not super relaxed, you tend to like mess up your visualization, which can kind of like ruin your confidence for your performance. So, yeah.
Okay. Say,
I might add just a little bit to that, just the idea that we talk a lot about consistency with student athletes in our department. And so when we have athletes that come in and say, hey, I'm having some, anxiety related to performance, or I'm having anxiety related to test taking or relationships, we talk a lot about how can we be consistent in taking care of ourselves. And so we would never say to a student athlete, at least we would never say to a student athlete, on the day of your competition, I want you to try this brand new thing that we're gonna, so like, don't do it. But on the day, like you're standing behind the blocks, I want you to try to visualize something. And so I think the other important part is, and we talk about this a lot in our department, is we say like, how many hours of sleep are you getting per night? How many days a week are you able to eat 3 meals a day? How much water are you drinking? When was the last time you connected to someone that you love, whether that's a partner or a family member or a teammate or a roommate? And then how do we integrate practicing that visualization, that self-talk, that, mindfulness on a regular basis? And so, because when we're feeling anxious, our bodies and brains naturally go back to the things that they know how to do, which is be anxious. And so in order for us to be able to use the skill when we need it, we have to practice the skill when we don't need it. And so getting in the habit of routinely practicing self-talk, routinely doing visualization is really valuable, so that when I actually need it and my brain's in a state of panic, that I know how to do it. And it's not a new skill I'm trying to develop when my brain is totally offline.
Yeah, Kelli, I love that. I love that. And a phrase that I often use is, and we know research tells us that when we're stressed, we go back to our habits, right? Just like you're saying. And so the only way to make the appropriate response when we're stressed to be a habit is to practice it in every single thing we do, right? So if you're taking a modern dance class, practice those strategies in your modern dance class. Practice it when you're getting ready to give a speech. Practice it when you're going out on a date, right? But the only way for those appropriate responses to become a habit is to practice them and integrate them into your life. So that way, when you do get behind the blocks or you are at the free throw line, those things are habits and they're going to come out.
Yeah. So Barbara, kind of then going off that. So if you say you're a student athlete who doesn't have access to a Barbara Meyer on their campus, what are some things that they can maybe do if they do have some sort of sport performance anxiety, those types of things? Are there any things that they can do? Again, starting ahead of time, as we've just learned, start putting into practice. Are there things that you recommend for student athletes?
I'm thinking about some of the strategies that Betsey mentioned as it relates to anxiety. And one thing that most of us have access to all the time is some sort of a playlist, right? We have a phone, we have something, and put together your pump up playlist for when you're feeling kind of bummed and feeling like you don't have energy, and then intentionally put together a, mellow out playlist for those times when the heart might be racing a little bit and your thoughts are maybe a little bit irrational. So one of the easiest low cost ways that most of us have access to is to work with music and put together playlists. Another one, and I think all of the panelists have touched on this, and this doesn't cost anything. We don't have to pay extra to take this on a trip in our checked bags, and that is work on your breathing, right? You can Google box breathing, Google breath counting, Google cognitive breathing techniques, right? And again, just work on your breathing. Whenever you feel your heart racing, do some of your breathing exercises. So those are really two low cost, accessible ones that I often go to is music and breathing.
Okay. Say, Betsey, anything that you do?
I really like self-talk and then journaling. I journal, I try to journal like every night, but obviously like sometimes I don't have time. But I try to journal like on a consistent basis. And I've noticed that it helps me like just kind of get out my thoughts. Because when you hold like thoughts in your head, then you like overthink things. And then the positive self-talk I do in school and in swim. So if I'm in a difficult situation, I just tell myself, I'm like, I can do it. Like I'm a good teammate. And then like reiterating those things in your head, like honestly make you a more positive person, I think. And then as far as motivation, I have an app on my phone. It's called Motivation. And I get little like motivation quotes every like 2 hours. And that has helped me a lot. And sometimes I feel like it just like reads my mind. Like it has the exact quote when I need it. And that's really helpful. That's been probably honestly the most helpful thing for me.
Great. So if you have, say, a teammate that's struggling, or, Kelli, on your end, maybe it's a roommate or something that's struggling with sort of maybe more of that day-to-day anxiety, or, Barbara and Betsey, if it's more the sport performance anxiety, what are some things that you can do to sort of help them? Kelli, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that we emphasize to our student athletes is just the idea of being good teammates and good roommates and good partnerships with people. So we want to encourage healthy relationships with one another. We want to encourage healthy communication. We want to encourage honesty, all of those things. I think, the other thing that's really important is to know what our limits and our bounds are. And so if I'm a good roommate, I can be a good listener to you, but there are some things that are way above my head and my pay grade. And so are there resources on campus that could be valuable? I know that there are a ton of apps. We have access to the Calm app. The Big Ten has given us access to the Calm app, which is wonderful. There's 10% Happier, there's Shine, there's all kinds of other apps that I think could be really helpful. But I think, again, I want to just reemphasize, like, the basic questions sometimes are so helpful. Did I get enough sleep? Have I eaten? Have I drank enough water? And am I connected to people that I love? And I ask my students those questions every time I see them. And the other one that I might add is, have you taken your supplements or any prescribed medication? So making sure that we're being consistent and taking care of our habits in that way. But I think being in a supportive role, being understanding, being a good listener, and then also knowing, are there resources on campus? Is there a CAPS that I can, send you to? Is there a 24-hour helpline? Like, we have a crisis line that students can call at 3 a.m. if they need to, that we would also call if we felt like there was an emergency or someone we needed to consult with someone. And so I just think kind of knowing what the resources are. The other thing is, and I don't know what other campuses are doing, but we have what's called the Green Bandana Project. And so we have student athletes that are trained to be extra supportive and to, so if I'm not Green Bandana trained, but one of my teammates is, I might say to my roommate, hey, maybe you could go talk to so-and-so because she's got the green bandana and that's a thing that is helpful, right? They have more resources. And so I think even just having extra knowledge about those things can be helpful as well. And I think, I don't know what other institutions do. I feel really thankful at IU that we do a lot of training as it relates to that. We have a required mental health training. We have the Green Bandana Project, and we work closely with our SAC. And so I think we have a lot of knowledge as far as what our athletes might share with their roommates. I don't know what other campuses are doing or might be able to do.
Hey, Barbara, Betsey, anything on the sport front? So you're at a meet and you have a teammate that's maybe struggling before their competition. Any advice you could give them as a student athlete?
I think the biggest thing that Kelli touched on was the know your boundaries and what you're competent in. I'm a student athlete. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have like a PhD or a doctorate. So if a teammate comes to me and talks to me about, like, performance anxiety and stuff, and having a little bit of background, I may help them. But I think it's important that if they're talking about like depression, anxiety when it comes to their sport or everyday life, that I refer them out or tell someone that can help them, because I can maybe like try to turn them in the right direction, but I don't know enough about how to deal with depression and anxiety, and someone else would better help them. So I think that's the most important part, is kind of knowing your boundaries and what you're competent in, and then referring out.
I think what Kelli and Betsey said they're spot on. A couple of other things were going through my mind is I want to make sure that the student athlete who is being approached by a teammate, again, is taking care of themselves. They're at a meet as well, or a competition as well. And a friend and a close teammate even sharing things could impact them and their performance and their mental well-being. So again, knowing your boundaries and setting those boundaries up front. Look, my heat is in 20 minutes, so I've got 5 minutes for you right now. However, I can recommend this app, or go talk to our assistant coach, or I see your parents are here. So again, make sure they're taken care of. But again, knowing not only your own boundaries and scope, but taking care of yourself and your performance as well.
Great. I said, Kelli, I know you mentioned the Green Bandana Project. I know several of our campuses have, and we actually have a student athlete that's participating in Green Bandana on our next panel as well. So definitely a great resource. So kind of the last question I think for you all is, how do you keep your daily life, any of those daily anxieties and that sort of from spilling over into your sport or into that performance? Any suggestions or tips there?
I'll go first, and I want to piggyback off something Betsey mentioned. Betsey said she's a journaler, and I think some of the best and healthiest athletes I know are really great compartmentalizers. and they can put their lives into these little boxes or compartments, right? So this is my English, and this is my anatomy, and this is my modern dance class, and this is this part, and they're good at compartmentalizing. And so the idea of, and there's a lot of research evidence to support the effectiveness of journaling, that you can journal, let's say you've had a rough day or even a good day, right? Because even good stress can impact our abilities performance-wise in a negative way. And so spending maybe 5 minutes to journal before practice or before you go to the weight room, and then 5 minutes to do some sort of breathing. Again, breath counting, box breathing, go to a mindfulness app. But that 10 minutes of journaling and breathing combined, journaling to do the brain dump, and then breathing to bring you back to the present moment and be in a place where you can consider what's ahead, is so effective for students, for performers in sport, performers in the military, performers in medicine. And so that's one way of compartmentalizing and segmenting and getting ready to move on to the next thing, which could be your athletic training session.
Great.
Yeah. I just would add, I think, we talk a lot about the idea that student athletes need to come and talk to us and see us every week. And we try to really emphasize the idea that if you take 10 minutes per day and take care of your mental health, that it's almost more effective than you coming and sitting in my office for 1 hour every week or every other week. And so just to reiterate that, I think that what am I doing every day that's taking good care of my mental health and wellness? And then also similar to what we've discussed before, the idea that I can't just show up to practice and expect to be able to compartmentalize everything that one time if I haven't tried to do it in other parts of my life. So if I don't have boundaries in other areas of my life, having boundaries around my sports performance and where that anxiety comes in is going to be really difficult. So what does that look like? How am I practicing that? How am I making that a routine in my life in other areas? And also then letting it bleed into and being intentional about it bleeding into the sports performance piece of my life.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Those are the questions we had. You gave us a lot of great advice, a lot of things that I may even take into my work. I'm not an athlete, but I still can use some of this, I think. So appreciate your time. And thank you so much for being here.